Hey everyone, welcome to the first ever episode of the Talent Lab Solutions podcast. I'm Michael Oppong.
And I'm Chris Blackett. We're the duo behind Talent Lab Solutions and also Best Buds.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today, Chris. We're still sorting things out, looking at different cameras and whatnot, but today we're just going to talk about us and kind of how we got to where we are right now. Let's get it started, Chris. That sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
My first question for you is, who are you?
My gosh, this is a tough one. So my name is Chris Blackett. I am a director of go-to-market strategy at Amplify Education, which is one of the leading K-12 education providers in the U.S. I am also the co-founder of Talent Lab Solutions with you, Michael. I'd like to think of myself too as a former educator. So I was a Teach for America alum and a Jumpstart alum. I had taught kindergarten and pre-K, then went to go work for Guild Education, and now I'm at Amplify.
Awesome. So tell me, how did it all start, Chris?
Yeah. So I think from a pretty young age, I've always loved working with kids. So I was like a camp counselor in high school. And then when I was in college, I joined Jumpstart, which was an AmeriCorps program. You work with pre-K students. And then my older sister was a big role model of mine. Shout out to Georgina Blackett.
Shout out. Big shout out.
Big shout out, one of our listeners. She joined Teach for America. And I remember visiting her classroom out in the Bay Area and sort of falling in love with the work she was doing, the community that she had built. She's actually just started a new job at the South San Francisco Unified School District. But I sort of followed in her footsteps and joined Teach for America afterwards. And I think was always sort of motivated by a sense of the importance of educational, right? The role that education has in leveling the playing field for students. And I didn't quite realize that in the past, sort of 10, 15 years, we have regressed in a lot of ways in educational equity. And so that has been sort of big motivator for me to get into this work. I'm curious, Michael, if you could tell me more about yourself.
I'd love to. Thank you for asking. Hey everyone, I'm Michael Oppong, also a co-founder here at Talent Lab Solutions, currently working at the Marcy Lab School as Director of Alumni Success. The Marcy Lab School is focused on providing opportunities for folks, particularly Black and Brown, underestimated folks, getting into the tech industry. My story starts with my parents. My parents migrated here to the U.S. from Ghana, a small country in West Africa, in pursuit of the American dream, right? Well, they got here. They left their friends and they left their family with not much money in their pockets and decided to start a life. And, I was the firstborn son. And from a very early age, they really stressed the importance of education. So, to start my educational journey, I actually started in kindergarten. I remember learning songs. There's a song what is it called?
I might know it if you...
I can't remember off the top of my head, and then I went to first grade. So kindergarten and first grade were both in public schools. And then I got this experience of what a public school was like in Newark, New Jersey. By the way, I'm from Newark. And it was not the best experience. And my parents quickly realized that. And they decided to invest their money into taking me to a Catholic school. My parents, both work very hard, but they don't have the most high paying jobs. My dad's a cab driver in New York City. My mom's a home health aide. So they scraped together their money to really emphasize and put me on the best educational path possible. So that Catholic school gave me a really great educational experience. Huge shout out to St. Mary's School in Newark, New Jersey. And I worked hard. I was, one of the kids who were trying to bring home A's, no A minuses in my household. Yeah. For any immigrant families, you probably know what that's like. You got it. And that
I have a tiger movie.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where my journey started, really kind of focusing on the importance of education and seeing that as a pathway out of poverty.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it all starts. Tell me about high school, what high school was like for you, what college was like for you.
Yeah. I think this is where our stories really diverge because I was privileged enough to go to a private school in New York. And so was exposed to, I was given a really amazing education, but really narrow socioeconomic diversity in our school. And then as sort of everyone, the expectation at our high school was everyone was going to a good college, right? There was sort of no alternative. And then I went to Tufts University. I had no idea what I wanted to do though. And it really was my older sister working in education that sort of provided that lens that this work is important. But Yeah, I'd say listening to your story, it's interesting. My wife, grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, and her parents also pulled her out of the school system there, moved to Bergen County, which has a better public school system. But it's sort of a shame that, high quality public education in this country isn't universally accessible. But yeah, so college, gosh, went to Tufts University, like someone else I know. Yeah. But yeah, it was a really different experience. And I think going into the classroom afterwards, so doing Teach for America, I taught in Harlem, was a really eye-opening experience. My high school was maybe 10% BIPOC, maybe 15%. And then the school that I taught at in Harlem is a pretty divisive charter school network. I was placed there for Teach for America called Success Academy. They call these charter schools in New York apartheid schools, or nickname them apartheid schools, because our school is 98, 99% BIPOC. So it was a totally different experience. It opened my eyes a lot to the resilience of our students, the importance of educational opportunity and access, but also, hyper-segregation in our school systems. Yeah. What about you? What was your high school to college experience?
Yeah. So again, I was in Newark. I was going to a Catholic school, St. Mary's School, and I was getting a good education. The school I would have gone to in high school, where everyone else went to, was another Catholic school, St. Benedict's Prep. A lot of people know them for a really good basketball team. I think J.R. Smith went there, Tristan Thompson. But fortunately for me, I got into a program called New Jersey Seeds. So there's a lot of these types of programs all on the east side of the United States. So New Jersey City's mission was to provide people from low-income backgrounds of high potential opportunity to attend independent high schools. So through that program, which it was a 3-phase program, it's really hard to get into. They cut people every phase. I made it all the way through, and I got an opportunity to go to independent boarding school in Newtown, Pennsylvania, called George School. It was in Bucks County. And let me tell you, Chris, this was a very different experience for me, coming from North New Jersey. And, the area, I grew up in, not the best area. And so to get on campus and to have, food all the time and like unlimited food, I, definitely gained some weight those first couple of years. But also, I was playing sports, there was grass, I grew up in a very urban environment in New Jersey, and then going to this very suburban environment was completely different for me. And I enjoyed it. I met a lot of different types of people, people from all over the world. My freshman year roommate was Native American. My sophomore year roommate was Taiwanese. My junior year roommate he's from Queens, but he's Colombian Italian. And my senior roommate was he's from New Jersey. Actually, he was in the New Jersey program too, but he's Portuguese. So you can imagine kind of the diversity at the school, and I really appreciated all the things that school exposed me to. And it wouldn't have been possible without, the investment that many people gave to me, from my 8th grade school teacher who told me to apply to the program, to all the donors who got me through this high school. As you can imagine, it was a very expensive high school. And I didn't pay a cent. Someone else paid it. Some donor. Thank you, donor.
Thank you, donor.
And then also my parents who, throughout this whole process, they were like, make sure you're working hard and you're getting proper education. That's kind of what I did. And with that, I had the opportunity to experience, a lot of other things besides education, whether it be sports and playing football or arts and making films and all these things that kind of make you a more well-rounded individual. And I know I wouldn't have had access to that had I gone to kind of my neighborhood school at the extent that I did at the school. So that's kind of my high school experience. And then I went to Tufts, which was a very different experience. To be honest, Chris, like when I got to Tufts, I didn't really like it that much.
It's funny. I had one of the students that I taught ended up going to Tufts and dropping out after his first semester because it was such a different experience. Went from a community that looked like him to Tufts.
Yes. Yeah. And, I got to, think part of the thing about George School was it was a Quaker boarding school. So the principles and the values of, the Quakerism were really welcome. And then I got to Tufts and it didn't have that lens on it. It didn't have that bubble on it. And so it was kind of very different, like, for me going to this predominantly white institution with people who don't hold these Quaker values. And so I got exposed to a lot of different things there. But I stayed. And I met you my second year of college, and we worked hard to get through that college experience, and then graduated and Then we did Teach for America. You talked a little bit about your Teach for America experience. I guess I'll share some of mine.
Yeah, please.
And so I applied to Teach for America. I had done some volunteering and some working for New Jersey Seeds. One of the things I'll mention here actually is that when I was younger, growing up in the community I grew up in, I didn't have exposure to a lot of different career types. I knew my dad was a cab driver. I knew my mom was, some type of nurse or home health aide.
Yeah.
I knew there was doctor, a lawyer, because my parents wanted to be a doctor, a lawyer. That's a lot of good parents want us to do. And I knew there was teacher was another option. I knew firefighter, police officer. That was kind of the extent of career paths I knew. Yeah. When I got to senior year, and one of my good friends told me, "Hey, I'm like trying to be a consultant." I'm like, "What is a consultant?" I don't know if I still have the answer to what a consultant is.
I'm not a consultant, and I don't know. I didn't mention this though, because I was just talking to my parents earlier, literally today, about the importance of representation and seeing other career paths.
Exactly.
My mom is getting involved with Fairfield, a university in Connecticut, but they're they have like a financial aid program, and they are trying to expose their students to all of these other career paths, because you have no idea what 90% of these jobs are, because you have, by no fault of your own, just a limited view, of what types of careers are out there.
Yeah. And I think, there's no class for that in college, right? You have your teachers, and luckily for me, I majored in English and mine in entrepreneurial leadership. But for me, I got exposed to some businessmen for my entrepreneurial leadership minor, but I didn't know. I know they did like marketing things, or finance things. I didn't know what the jobs really were, and maybe I should have done a better job of researching. You get senior, and in October or September, people are already applying for jobs, for these consulting jobs, or software engineering jobs. Like I had no idea what that was, and you're kind of like, oh, you've got to figure things out. Yeah. And so I applied to Teach for America, and I pretty early on actually, and because they did some recruitment on campus, I got a job pretty early on. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah. I'm passionate about this, and I was passionate about it. I'd seen the impact that education can have on people from backgrounds like mine and who grew up in environments like that. And I said, I want to be a part of that. Yeah. I want to be someone who can show in person what that journey is. Yeah. And so I applied for Teach for America. I got in. And guess where I went, Chris? North New Jersey, right back home. Right back to North Chris City. And so I went back to Newark, and I was going to teach at West Side High School. For those who know, that's when Newark, I was going to teach ninth grade special needs students. I came in ready to go, ready to do the best job I could, because that's kind of what I've done in my life. And I set up my classroom. I tried to figure things out. And, that first year was a really hard year, Chris. And I'm sure it was for you too. But for me, I had very high expectations of what I could do in that classroom and what I could accomplish. You got the Teach for America training. They rile you up and tell you you're going to, get in there. Yeah. Everybody's going to learn, and, get 4 level grade levels up. And, it wasn't as easy as I didn't think it was easy. I wouldn't make it seem like that. And I didn't, I wasn't as, cocky as to think I was going to come in and kind of actually change the world. But I did expect my efforts to have, a more significant impact than it did. And it did have an impact. I worked with a small group of students, as I said before, who were, special needs. And I was just shocked at how far behind some of these students were. And, I taught in 8th grade. There had to be so many years that someone failed and for them to get in front of me. Yeah. And for me to see the things that I was seeing. I had students in my class in 9th grade who couldn't read. Yeah. I mean, they say that your 8th grade math scores, right, are predictive of your life outcomes, because to your point, 8th grade is such a pivotal year, but if you do not have early literacy interventions, right, then all of those cascading failures affect students. Yeah. And that's very clear when it came to me. Yeah. I'm in a classroom. I have kids at a 2nd grade or 1st grade reading level, and I have kids at a 12th grade reading level. So I'm trying to figure out. I wanted to reflect, I think, the difference in my first year of teaching, and I only taught for 3, but the difference in my first year of teaching, I think, for years, is I taught at Success Academy, which, like I mentioned earlier, is a really controversial, divisive charter school. But one thing it does have is a lot of resources. And so I think what you've underscored in your experiences are really the importance of a community, right? It takes a village to raise and educate children. Yes. Yeah.
And like from the very beginning, right? You need head start programs, you need supports and trainings for parents and things like that. And it sounds like you didn't necessarily have those schools.
Yeah. I think, one of the things I value about the place I work now, the Martin Lab School, is they understand that, and they understand how deep that investment has to be to support people who have been failed so many times.
Yeah.
And, all the organizations that I've worked in the past do understand that, and I know that to be true.
Yeah.
You can't just give someone who's, missed out on so many opportunities and missed out on so many learnings. You can't just start them from where everyone else started.
Yeah.
We need to invest deeply. And I think, that's in many ways where our education system is failing right now, right? It's not recognizing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think underscoring that too, like right around when you started teaching in Newark, I think probably maybe a few years before then, in case our listeners are not aware, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative invested $300 million into the New York education.
That's a big number, Chris.
Big number.
It makes a big difference, hopefully, right?
Yeah, one would hope. And then I think, as you and I know, sadly, is it didn't, because they did not work with some of the community leaders and stakeholders to figure out how to deploy that money. And so I think that also underscores the importance of like learning is contextualized too, right? Like no one knows more about what their children and students need than the families and teachers are.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with the classroom was, and I didn't know too much about, the politics behind it at that time or what was going on. All I knew is suddenly there were consultants in my classroom, sitting back in my classroom.
Consultants?
Yes, consultants. Highly paid consultants.
Highly paid? What are they doing? Wait, why were there consultants in your classroom?
So they're observing. So they observed me and my teaching, and I guess the hope was to understand where, I was failing or the teacher was failing.
Yeah.
You know what they told me, Chris, after they observed me?
Yeah.
Doing a great job.
Well, I mean, they probably, hopefully these well-paid consultants also realize that like, it's not the individual teachers necessarily failing them, because it's, like you mentioned, some of these students were coming in below grade level on reading. It was, the system had failed them years before they got into the class.
Yeah. And so, a lot of money was spent on these.
Just to say to the kids.
To see what was going on.
Yeah.
It didn't work out.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my experience in the classroom.
Yeah.
During that time. We both graduated. We don't have to teach, and then I think our paths kind of veered a bit more.
Yeah.
I would love to hear about what happened you did after core experience.
Yeah, so I think this is where we were talking about the importance of like role models, or even being exposed to people of like different careers. So I taught for 3 years, but I knew I didn't want to be in a classroom forever. I loved the social impact component. I loved working with kids. I hated teacher salaries, and I just didn't think it was, I knew I was going to have many careers in my life. And so I actually went back to grad school. So I got an MBA, MPA at NYU. And again, this was being exposed to people in my family who had gone to grad school and gotten in. I also had no idea what a consultant did. I had a bit of imposter syndrome getting into graduate school and attending. I was, I think, 24 when I started, so pretty young. And everyone around me is recruiting for consulting. I had no idea what the big 5 consulting firms were. I had no idea what consultants did. And so I was like, nope, I just knew I didn't want to work for Bain or McKinsey. Everyone was recruiting for tech. And so I sort of got caught up in it. I am half Filipino, half Asian. So part of me just really wanted to be an expat in the Philippines. And so I ended up working for Samsung with a hope to eventually move to their South Korea office. But then I met my wife. And I call this like, anytime I talk to people and they want to hear about my career path, they're always surprised about Samsung, because it is the job that does not fit my career journey. And so it's like the dark days. I was like wandering the desert. I hated my time there. I was just like doing things that didn't interest me, finding ways to sell phones. And so then the pandemic happened, and I got a job at an organization called Guild, which was much more up my alley. So Guild Education is a female-founded benefit corporation and a unicorn focused on higher education and upskilling. So they partner with employers to provide education and upskilling benefits for their employees. And so they work with companies like Chipotle, Disney, JP Morgan, Target, to provide all of their employees, whether they are frontline hourly employees or whether they are, full-time mid-level managers. And it was a really fascinating place to be because Guild showed me how successful a company can be when it aligns what we call the sort of triple bottom line. When your investors are aligned with your customers, who are students, who are aligned with your other stakeholders, which are these companies. And so they had found this business model where everyone was sort of aligned on, if you upskill a frontline employee and give them a cybersecurity certification, or if you help them finish their bachelor's degree, right? That helps the employee. That helps the employer because now these people are retaining at the company for longer. They are more mobile. So we did studies that found like the fastest path to the middle class in the United States is actually a job at Chipotle, believe it or not, because they promote internally, they pay for your degrees. And so it's just like fascinating things like that. And then, of course, our investors liked it because the more students are taking these programs, the more these employers are paying us and are paying our academic providers and partners. And so that was a really phenomenal experience. So I was there for 2 years. And I would really work with these employers to try and make their education benefits as equitable as possible. So pay for everything from your books, any fees like application fees to help with stranded credits. A lot of the composition of our like student learners were, frontline employees who had maybe started college or started an associate's degree, dropped out because like time management was tough, right? Or they went to a like predatory for-profit and couldn't afford it anymore. And so we would help them apply to programs. We provided coaching for them to persist and complete these programs. And it was a really amazing experience. And I feel like quite similar to some of your work, which, I'm wondering now that I've talked about Guild, one of our sort of competitors was Multiverse. But then even before Multiverse, you had worked at Codemation. And so curious if you could tell us about your time after the classroom, because we both diverged a little after teaching and then both ended up in sort of upskilling and higher education.
Yeah. I think, I still remember the moment when I decided I wanted to leave the classroom, and I was in the back of my classroom. My smart board was on. I love my smart board. I heard things about the classroom. And on the screen, I just listened to a playlist of Mark Cuban interviews. And I was rating quizzes. I was rating quizzes of But Not Buddy quizzes, if you ever read that book. And I was just listening to Mark Cuban talk about tech and how important tech was, how it was changing the world. And I was like, I got to get into this tech thing. How do I get into this tech thing? And so, I finished my second year of teaching, and I decided I wanted to get into tech. So I moved to New York City without a job, and spent the power savings I had made, and eventually I found a job at a PR agency, a tech PR agency. Though, I was pretty early on to that PR agency that I realized I didn't want to do PR, but I really liked the tech part of it, and that's kind of what kept me around. I got to use the bathroom whenever I wanted, which is very different.
You have to hold it in. You don't realize you can pull a teacher who's wandering the hallway into class.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. So, I went from being in the classroom, working with students every day, who I could see the impact I was having in their lives, to, working on bylines, or, people who are making tons of money, and organizations and companies who are making tons of money. It wasn't as impactful as
I'm glad you brought that up, if I can interrupt you quickly, because I feel like people don't fully realize, like when you were a teacher, or a lot of people I talk to who are trying to transition out of the classroom, when you were a teacher, you see the incremental progress your students make every day. And it's so validating. And then you get into, knowledge economy, white collar, corporate job, and you don't get that feedback loop. And it's kind of tough. You're responsible for so much as a teacher. And with that responsibility comes, progress, and learning, and you name it. So I, after the first couple months, I was like, all right, I'll see my here and self here for a long time. But I got to work for cool companies like Facebook and MoviePass, and that was cool. And so I need to find a way to find my path for education and technology, and that's when I came
came upon an organization called Script That at the time. Ultimately became Coordination. And at that organization, the mission was to increase diversity in the tech industry by providing people from under-resourced high schools with the skills, experience, and network they needed to access careers in technology. So we worked with high school students. We taught them front-end web development. I worked there as a program manager.
And as someone who didn't know what a software engineer did in college, right? Like this is that career exposure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I ended up actually taking a computer science class my senior year of college, I think spring semester. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I enjoy it. This is fun. I'm pretty good at it.
Yes.
All right, I have a job. Yeah, I'm going to be a teacher. And so when I got to, this organization, I felt, revitalized in a way, right?
Yeah.
I got to really combine my passion for technology and education in the most seamless way possible. Yeah. And I really enjoyed my work there. I worked there for, 6 years, ended up leading the national programs department, starting the national programs department. It was lovely. And then I found Multiverse, which you spoke about before. And Multiverse Multiverse is a UK-based company that builds apprenticeship programs to, compete with college and corporate training.
Yeah.
And so I spent a few years there as a learning product manager, and I learned a lot. Multiverse is going through a bunch of stuff, and they're still going through.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Talk about probably in another episode.
Yeah.
But whilst I was at Multiverse, I was, speaking with Chris. Chris actually lived a block away from me not too long ago. I'm now convincing him to move back to Harlem.
We currently in Harlem right now, so I think it's slowing down. Yeah.
And so Chris lived a block from me. And, whenever we got together, we always talked about education and our experiences and what was going on. And so we decided to start Talent Lab Solutions from those conversations. What was your experience like in those conversations?
Yeah, I think a lot of our conversations were around the ability of technology to support educational outcomes, but at the same time, and I think it's become much more visible in the past 2 years, but at the same time, a lot of companies were struggling to do it, right? And I think we've talked about this a lot. One of the core tenets of Talent Lab is trying to help organizations, entrepreneurs, founders, educators really try to avoid some of the missteps that we've seen other companies do. And I think, Guild, you mentioned Multiverse, both Guild and Multiverse Guild laid off 40% of their employees, and I would say had a few missteps along the way. Still a wonderful company, but, we write in our Substack too about a lot of other organizations sort of failing or struggling. And if we could just, any of them move the needle, especially given our background in the classroom, then I think that would be worth it in the end. And so that sort of has always stuck with me as like the North Star, is like what learnings we brought from our time in the classroom. I cannot tell you how many times I talk to people who work at ed tech companies, who are starting an ed tech company, who have no experience in the classroom. And I think that is like a huge differentiator that you need, and that is some of the lens that we can provide. Right?
Yeah. And I think that's what I appreciate about, many of the organizations I worked at. A lot of them are teachers.
Yeah.
And so that was super helpful in building experiences for students, learners. And I think, when I think about why we started Talent Lab Solutions, I think about the fact that every single second and every single cent and every single dollar that goes into mistake is not going to the student. Yeah. It's not going to driving forward the outcomes of a student. Yeah. That pains me.
Yeah, it goes through a consultant.
That dollar goes through so many, so many people, so many systems, so many things. Yeah. In an inefficient way before it gets a student. Yeah. I hate that, right? All these systems, process, technology, all these tools should increase the impact of that dollar, turn that dollar to $5, so $5 gets to the student. And that's what we started this organization, this company for, Talent Lab Solution, to help people avoid those mistakes and amplify their impact. That's the basis of Talent Lab Solutions.
And for our listeners, there's so much waste. I think generally we all recognize there's so much waste, but here in New York City, where we're filming this, DOE spends something like $35,000 per student, right? Per year, which is crazy. There's so much waste. And it's, I love the idea of just making it more efficient and optimizing it so that it helps students. I secretly also think one of the reasons I really wanted to start Talent Lab with you is for the newsletter, but also this, which we are starting, this podcast. I've been dreaming of this podcast, I think, for 2 years now. And so
I'm glad we're starting.
I'm glad we're starting it too.
It's like Insight Series is a podcast dedicated to exploring the intersection of education, technology, and workforce development. We're
With two very charming and funny pairs.
very charming and funny. And so we're looking to kind of shed light on trends, challenges, opportunities for different people that are shaping the future of, future of work, future of learning. And so that's what we'll do here. And this is our first episode.
Yeah.
Did you have fun?
I had a blast. And I think the other thing I'm really excited about this podcast is some of the people we've already interviewed and some of the people we are planning on interviewing that we have scheduled.
Oh, we have some stuff in store.
These are people who are like operators at these companies, right? It isn't, you're not just talking to the CEO, or you're not just talking to like a thought leader. You're talking to like, Sach, who is the director of partnerships at Guild, right? Or some of the CSMs at Udemy who like, Udemy, we could spend hours talking about, but these people have worked at these companies, have really seen the insides of them, have so many insights. Again, to your point around how companies can be more efficient, some of the missteps, right? I think, especially as we look to some of those edtech players that struggled, understanding where they went wrong and hearing insiders' accounts of that is really fascinating. So that, I think, is something I'm so excited about.
Yeah, and we've had a few conversations already. We're looking forward to it. I learned a lot about Chris today. Hopefully you learned a little bit about me.
Oh my gosh, I did. It's funny. We've known each other for
years
now and still learning so much.
Yeah, and so we're not learning, right?
Oh my God, like 15 years.
Don't remind me how old we are.
Yeah.
But thank you all for listening. Please subscribe, and please subscribe to our Substack. And see you next time.
See ya.
For EdTech Insights.